Matt.
I'm Shane.
And if you like what you hear, make sure you hit that thumbs up button real hard, and make sure you subscribe to Comic Movie Marks.
And also click that little bell for all of the notifications.
Whee!
Always remember,
if Trailer Trash can do it,
anyone can do it.
Hello and welcome everyone to another Comic Movie Marks video.
It is here, it is time, it is the MCU completely ranked 1 through 18, obviously before Infinity War.
So we finally finished all our retro reviews of the MCU. Finally, Ant-Man was that last one to get through, and that was probably one of our best reviews, so definitely check that one
save
out.
the best for last.
So, I want to kind of preface something here. We are ranking the MCU movies. We've seen all 18 of these movies, and this doesn't necessarily mean that these are my favorite movies. I was looking at this list, and I'm like, well, if I had to rank this into my best comic book movies, only one of these would actually make my best comic book movies ever list. So, it's kind of funny. The middle of my list is very scattered and kind of all over the place and very meaningless, like some of the MCU movies. And
ooh, shots fired already.
No, the middle was very difficult, actually. It was very surprising. So we're just going to go through this one at a time, 18 all the way to number 1. So Shane, let's give your number 1. Or 18. Shit.
Yeah, I was like, wow, just blowing the load right off the bat. Sounds pretty
yeah, because
accurate
everybody's
for me.
dying to hear what our number 1 is.
Yeah. All right, so my number 18 probably will not come to a surprise for a lot of you is Iron Man 3.
Woo! How could you, man? All right.
I remember ranking Iron Man 3 around a 1.8. And it kind of in hindsight, that's I think where it belongs, is right down there at the bottom. Such a disappointment from what it could have been.
Yep. Yeah, also when it comes to my scoring system, I have no idea if these are actually in the order of my scoring system. I just base this off of, some of this is hindsight, some of this is, whatever felt right at the time. So my number 18, of course, is Avengers. Is Iron Man 3. I fucking hate it. If you listen to our review with Nick, it's an hour and a half of a pissing contest. That's all it is. Nothing more, nothing less. Iron Man 3 is garbage. Mandarin's garbage. Trevor is garbage. It's all pieces of shit.
Yep, agreed. And I'm glad you brought that up about the scoring. For me, I tried to put it in ballparking of like what I remembered. I remember some of them kind of falling roughly around the same as others, but then things have evolved. I have more of an appreciation for Civil War from what I originally gave it. So things kind of evolve over time, and so number 17 is Civil War. No, I'm just kidding.
It evolved from 18.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, my number 17 is Ant-Man.
Wow.
Ant-Man, it was just so meh, as we talked about. And it was hard. It was.
Did we?
For all about 2 seconds, but it was definitely hard to put this above anything else. And as we get into the next couple, you'll start to see that I ranked Ant-Man, I think, around a 2.6, and so that's pretty low for a lot of them. And as Matt said, there is a block here where they all are just kind of a mishmash. But Ant-Man, unfortunately, it's okay. It's enjoyable in some aspects, but there's also a lot of plot holes, a lot of shit that doesn't make sense, and a lot of stuff that got because of Civil War pretty much got a kibosh put on it. So it's almost irrelevant.
So speaking of plot holes, my number 17 is Thor Ragnarok.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
I thought this movie was just garbage. I mean, there was some funny parts, and as I said in our review, the parts I did laugh in the movie, I did laugh fairly hard at, but that's far and few between. I just did not like the movie. It totally fucked with everything. I couldn't stand the movie. The way it dragged out the comedy it just beat the same joke over over and over and over. I couldn't stand it. So my number 17 is Thor Ragnarok.
All right. So my number 16 is Doctor Strange. And even though I scored them roughly about the same, there were some things that were enjoyable with Doctor Strange, but it was also one of the most infuriating movies, I think pretty close to Iron Man 3, where something that we were so stoked for and just ended up being just a joke. And
unlimited potential.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and I mean that it was a joke in several ways. They decided just to make the whole movie all about jokes and fun, and that was the word of 2016. And joy. That's right. Yep,
joy was the word of 2016.
Yes, fun was 17. Did I have those backwards?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, fun was 17.
Yeah, so it was all about joy, and unfortunately, as Matt said, so much potential, and it's such a disappointment from what it could have been. So bottom of the barrel, scraping it, probably right in line with Ant-Man. Not much higher. I think maybe the action scenes were a little bit cooler, but that's about it.
My number 16 is Doctor Strange. Just listen to our review. It pretty much kicks off and tells you exactly how we feel. And we couldn't stop laughing.
Yep, exactly.
So, waste of potential, as Shane said. So many possibilities. And again, I love bringing this up every time when you hear the writer for Doctor Strange talk about how he had so much weird shit that he had planned in the first draft of Doctor Strange and told him no, because casual audiences wouldn't get it.
I mean, we're adding the Marvel formula to Doctor Strange and then being allowed to play with the weird stuff. I mean, they're not afraid of the weird stuff. Mm-hmm. They've kept us grounded in that there were some things, especially our early pitch that we brought in, where they were like, we didn't know this wasn't what we wanted for the first movie, but this proves that the audiences aren't ready for it.
That it just tells you everything. And
punch Kevin Feige right in the face, because that is the problem with modern movies, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so my number 15 is Thor: Dark World. Now, I don't hate this movie like I hated Doctor Strange and Iron Man 3. It just was kind of just bland. There wasn't much to it. It had some decent spots, but like a lot of MCU movies, very forgettable. Just roll along and give me the next movie. Keep pumping them out. It just was what it was.
My number 15 is Age of Ultron. Holy shit, was this movie fucking boring. Just so boring. I thought with hindsight it would make the movie kind of cool. Like, oh yeah, look, that's what they were trying to do. No, there's nothing. There's Thor in a hot tub or whatever, an electric hot tub. That's supposed to kind of be like what Thor Ragnarok is, but it really, because the way they decided to go with Thor Ragnarok, making it a fucking comedy skit, an SNL skit, it basically meant nothing. It was all fucking nothing. Age of Ultron is the most boring movie, and I fell asleep through it several fucking times.
And that's literal as well, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
If you did not listen to that review, that is a complete literal thing that he actually did fall asleep through this several times.
I kept waking up through each little part. Oh, God, what the hell's going on? Oh, we're here? It was like time travel.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, we're here? Perfect. I didn't miss anything.
No, awesome.
Yeah. All right, so my number 14 is Thor Ragnarok, and that it comes in just a glimmer above Thor Dark World. As Matt mentioned,
actually surprised.
There were some things with Ragnarok, like you said, the comedy. There were things that I did laugh at, and in that, there were some things that were a little bit more memorable than Dark World. There are aspects of the first two Thors that I do enjoy. I like Thor's character a lot better in the first two, but the movie itself, I don't know if it's the age that we live in or maybe it was the comedy. I mean, not that Dark World came out a fucking forever ago, but it's a little bit different, and maybe because Ragnarok was so different, it's a little bit more memorable. I mean, just by a hair, it came in over Thor Dark World.
The one thing I will give Thor Ragnarok, and I almost moved it up my list for this reason alone, it is so terrible, it's almost roastable. How shitty, what we talked about. I've listened to our review, and I'm making fun of that radar with the little red dots.
Right.
And my reaction in the theater was, isn't that fucking convenient? And like those little roasting moments and shit like that, it almost moved Thor Ragnarok up because I have fun watching it, making fun of it because it's just so bad. It's so poorly written, the plot holes and everything. So I almost did move it up, but I had to stick to my guns on that.
All right. Yeah, actually, Matt and I have talked about, I don't know if it's on air or off air, but we have talked about doing a commentary on Thor Ragnarok, just roasting the shit out of it. So that still remains to be seen if we have time for that, but I think it would be entertaining as hell.
All right, my number 14 is The Rock, or Ant-Man, however you want to call it, depending on if you listen to our review or not. But Ant-Man, that, like I said in the review, for the split second we talked about it, it's the most meh movie I've ever seen in my life. I could care less whether it's good or bad. Doesn't mean anything to me at all. I'm so indifferent on the movie. The movie could never exist, and it would never matter to me at all. It doesn't affect the MCU in any manner. It's just worthless.
All right, so my number 13 is Avengers Age of Ultron. And I would put this almost right with Thor Ragnarok. I actually, if I'm remembering the scoring right, I scored it right around the same as Thor Ragnarok. And as Matt said, just boring. It's almost a full movie that's complete filler. Yeah, it just is. There's nothing much to it. There's some cool action parts. Ultron is awesome for a second when he first gets introduced, and then he just becomes slapstick, stupid humor, and that's about it.
Number 13 for me is Thor 1. Now, Thor, I actually thought had okay comedy in the first one because I do like the pet store joke, give me a horse. And he's like, we don't have a horse. Give me something big enough to ride. We have dogs or cats, just fucking.
Right.
That was funny. But other than that, the movie is so generic and so stupid. Every other character other than Thor is terrible. It just really sucked ass.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and roll into my number 12 is actually Thor as well. So it sounds like we're almost right in line with that. I actually think this was the best out of the 3 Thor movies, obviously, based on my ranking. And I think that, really? Yeah, if people are actually paying attention, if they're keeping score at home, this one, they're all on the bottom of the barrel, but this one was the best one. It is very generic, but for some reason it works. I remember watching this when we were going to.
It has a tad bit of charm.
It does for sure. And I remember when we were like researching. I use that term loosely. When we were doing preparing for our retro review of Thor, I remember actually enjoying this a little bit more. Kind of thinking this one was so forgettable after I watched it the first time around. And I don't know why. And as you said, some of the humor lands. I love Thor's character in this. I like the concept of him coming to Earth. It is very generic and pretty predictable, but it works. Like you said, there's some charm to it, and it works. So my favorite out of the Thor movies for sure, and my number 12.
So probably my most controversial ranking here, because this is considered to be one of the worst MCU movies by everybody else that does a fucking list because it's the same thing. But Thor 2 is number 12. The reason why I actually have Thor 2 above the other ones is because this one did do things and it took itself more serious in the MCU. And for some reason that really got rejected. I was really surprised they killed Thor's mom. I mean, technically they kind of killed Loki. I mean, they really went all out in this, and I felt that there was some stakes. Yes, the villain's completely forgettable and he's complete garbage. But you got to see a little bit more of the 9 realms of Thor trying to fix the realms, and he's in battles with the with his comrades and shit like that, which I thought would be a more interesting movie if he just hung out with the Warriors 3 and shit the whole time. But I don't know. I actually liked it. I did like it for the most part. I know the villain is terrible and easily forgettable, but the fact that they took a little bit more risks with this one, and I actually felt like the Thor's mom's death actually kind of meant something in that movie, and then it kind of felt like Loki did die. I guess, maybe some people were like, oh, it was obvious in hell he didn't die. They're not going to kill Loki. But, they tried. They kind of threw the dice out there a little bit. They tried a little bit. So, again, it kind of stands out.
My number 11 is Captain America. So Captain America, the first Avenger. I remember this one. I'm creeping kind of towards the middle of my list a little bit. Nothing too much that I hated about it, but nothing that was like super enjoyable. And a lot of people use the first Avenger as an argument as to why Superman done this way would be more relatable. And, oh, look, you could still have the Christopher Reeve version in now, you know, in current times, and it could be successful. Look at Captain America. It's done so well. And in that, I would almost put Captain America and Superman Returns like in the same bucket. Maybe Captain America is a little bit better than Superman Returns, but I just don't really care for the character too much. I remember there's like a lot of wasted time in it, and so it was kind of it was okay. What's his name? Red Skull was okay. I think Tommy Lee Jones' character was awesome, and there's some cool aspects to the movie. Some decent action when they get into it. But other than that, nothing too crazy. So just right in the middle of the road.
My number 11 is Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2, it works on some levels and it doesn't work. It's done by Jon Favreau. It keeps the consistency from the first one, but it does fall short because there is a little bit of world building in there and it just kind of feels a little cluttered. But in the end of the day, I still thought some of the jokes were funny. Not as funny as the first one, but it still had its moments.
So rolling right into it, my number 10 is Iron Man 2. So as Matt was saying, I completely agree. It's some things work. Jon Favreau does a good job. It sticks closer to the tone of the first one, which I enjoyed. I do like Mickey Rourke's character. I wish they could have delved into him a little bit more. And there's some things that work, some things that didn't. Again, just kind of a middle of the road movie, but it's enjoyable. It's a popcorn flick for sure.
Okay, my number 10 will swippy pop flop, whatever. My number 10 is Captain America: The First Avenger. Kind of relaying what Shane just said. It's an average movie. I kind of always got blown away by the fact that they montaged over the action scenes in a World War II movie.
Yeah, good point.
Kind of puzzling sometimes, but like Shane said, Tommy Lee Jones' character was cool. I mean, I kind of like the idea of Steve Rogers. I mean, he did okay, but there is just some weird ideas that to put him in predicaments. Again, it's this ex machina type situations. To put him in the predicaments to make him excel are usually very far fetched.
All right, so rolling into it, my number 9 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Jesus Christ.
Hopefully that's good or bad. I'm not really sure, but we're about halfway through our list, so this one is almost the definition of middle of the road. It was decent. It had some good parts. I think there was, as Matt and I had talked about, a lot of character connection in this one as opposed to the first one. There was some humor that worked. It was decent. I didn't mind it at all. So Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, number 9.
My number 9 is Guardians of the Galaxy 2. That's why I said Jesus Christ. Like, we're almost lined up here perfectly.
I know, it's pretty funny. We did not come together on this and say, oh, let's figure it out. We just came up with our own list, and it's hilarious how two idiots can think alike.
I think the Thor movies are the only ones that were really different on. That's it. That's just, other than that, our list is almost lined up perfectly. Anyway, so number 9, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. It was okay. There was some comedy. The music was definitely not as good as the first one. The CGI wasn't as good, and the story was just a little tad wonky, and Ego was a terrible villain.
All right, so my number 8 is Black Panther. I enjoyed this movie. I think it's kind of funny because my list is almost in two parts. This is where I do start kind of hitting the upper part, and the rankings were a little bit closer. Was actually from like 8 on up. And Black Panther I did enjoy. Killmonger was awesome. There's some humor in there that didn't really work for me. I remember a lot of the jokes weren't all that great. Great action sequences. The CGI was good. Killmonger, obviously a great villain. And it did have some little bit of relatable story in there as well.
My number 8 is Black Panther.
Holy shit.
Again, kind of what reiterating what Shane just said. Killmonger was great. He definitely carried that movie. Some of the mythos that Black Panther provided was good as well, but the humor was awful. I'm pretty sure, other than maybe Iron Man 3, but actually, no, there is a joke in Iron Man 3 that I laughed at. I did not laugh at a single fucking joke in Black Panther, not even smiled. The humor was god-awful. It was terrible. Claw was cool, but then there was some middle part that just dragged, and it got boring. It just got boring. They were trying to world build. I mean, not necessarily world build, but they were trying to Wakanda build, like give you this idea of this mythos of Wakanda and stuff, and it just was boring. So it just dragged. But Killmonger is good. T'Challa himself is kind of a cool character, even though I feel like they nerfed him a little bit from Civil War in this one. But still, it works overall.
All right. So before I get into my number 7, I just want to say that the next few, as I kind of touched on with Black Panther, they were super close in scoring wise and stuff like that. And I was trying to like remember what I did originally, and then when we were doing our retro reviews, and I kind of like adjusted them. And I'm prefacing that because I think this is going to be one of the more controversial ones. But my number 7 is Avengers, the first one, obviously. Ooh. Yeah. So I do enjoy the first Avengers. I enjoy it. When we did the retro review, I enjoyed watching it again. It's definitely up there for one of the better movies. But I remember the third act kind of being like a lot of eye-rolling moments. And there were certain things that didn't bug me when I watched them several years ago, that now I'm watching them again. I'm like, I don't remember Black Widow being so fucking annoying and like convenient. And, Hawkeye even doesn't really fit in for me in the third act of it. So there were certain things that kind of fell apart in the third act where that's why I knocked it down a couple pegs in my mind. Yeah,
vicious.
It is a good movie. I definitely enjoy it. Like I said, it's definitely up there, the top rankings of the films. But when I was really going in hindsight for these, I'm like trying to piece them together. It ended up at number 7.
Okay, my number 7 is Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Wow.
Again, this is... Oh, here we go. Now we're going to see some difference in Shane and I's list.
Yeah.
Again, this is actually probably the point where these are movies that I would rewatch. Like these other ones, I would not rewatch again unless I had a gun pointed to my head. But these I would rewatch from 7 down, basically. I would rewatch again. Spider-Man: Homecoming, Tom Holland's an okay Spider-Man, and Vulture, of course, carries the shit out of the movie. Michael Keaton destroys all other MCU villains. I'm sorry. I know people have a Killmonger boner, but Vulture is so much better than any of them, and he should be praised for carrying that fucking movie. But again, the Tony Stark thing drags the movie down. There's a couple other functions in the movie, Liz or whatever, and there's just some other things that are a little annoying. The robot suit or whatever, the basically the mini Tony Stark suit, with Veronica or whatever the hell it is as the AI. It's all a little it doesn't feel very Spider-Man-y sometimes. So, but number 7.
All right, so my number 6 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. This one is what I remember it being so different from when it first came out of kind of like it started the whole comedy. Okay, maybe not started. I've said that several times, but it definitely it was different for sure. A lot brighter colors, a lot more humor. It was a comedy based movie as opposed to being an action superhero based movie, and I enjoyed that. And even when you watch it in hindsight, there's some things that don't quite work. I don't know if the humor holds up as long. Maybe Drax, his humor is still pretty funny. Rocket, I think his humor is still pretty funny. But the action is pretty sweet. The story's very linear, but it works for what it was doing. And I can't even remember what's the villain's name?
Ronan?
Yeah, Ronan. Yeah, his I enjoyed him a lot more than other than being nerfed right at the very end. I really enjoyed his character, and there was a lot of things when we were doing our retro review that I didn't remember. That I'm like, you know what? He's a pretty decent villain, aside from the very end. Like they did a really good job with him. So,
all right, my number 6 is The Incredible Hulk. Now, a lot of people downplay this movie, and I think it was on Shane and I both underrated comic book list. And it's severely underrated, and I don't know why it is so received so poorly. Like I just saw today's honest trailers of it, and it's just they're talking about how Mark Ruffalo is such a better Banner and shit like that. And I'm like, what? No. Edward Norton played a perfect Banner, and I actually like the CGI of that Hulk better than the one we have now.
Yeah, I do too.
It looks so much more. It looks better, I think, and they had a really good job on that movie of just scope and scale. It felt like a Hulk movie, and of course, honest trailers had to make the joke about Abomination looking like Doomsday, yada yada.
Right.
Good shot, way to go. I'm glad you guys make a bunch of money to make that dumbass joke. Anyway, number 6, definitely.
All right. So rolling right into my number 5 is Incredible Hulk. As Matt said, I really, really enjoy this movie. There's nothing like crazy about it. It's pretty basic in, when you're talking about, I guess, superhero movies in general, comic book movies in general, where, the villain wants the same powers as the hero. So let me go get those powers. But it was just the Napoleon complex. It was so well done. And I agree with Matt that Ed Norton, way better Bruce Banner, in my opinion. Maybe not for the MCU and the jokes and everything that they throw out there. But definitely for what I'm looking at a Bruce Banner, he hits the nail on the head. It's too bad that he couldn't continue with this. And I really enjoy the movie. It's definitely underrated. Definitely a forgotten film.
Yep. My number 5 is Captain America's Civil War. Like Shane said previously, have grown to appreciate this movie a little bit. I don't know if it's good or bad that the most recent MCU movies have sucked so much ass that it makes you appreciate a decent movie.
Yes.
I don't know if that really elevates this movie that high or not. I mean, it's still a solid movie. I just always thought the plot to get these guys to fight was so fucking terrible. I still think you have a set of balls on you to say that BVS has a stupid plot to make them fight when you actually listen to what the fuck makes these assholes fight. It's just the dumbest thing. It's so illogical. It has no purpose, and it was so forced, and it never made sense to me at all. At least there was, I don't know, there's at least a little more to it in Batman vs. Superman than that. But other than that, the action is okay. The look of the movie is okay. It's a lot grittier. It looks good. It's a decent movie. It does try to give you a little bit more in it than most MCU movies, so that's why it's number 5.
Yep. Perfect. Rolling into my number 4 is Civil War. Definitely, as Matt said, it feels a little bit different. The Russo brothers definitely try to branch out a little bit more with their films, which I can for sure appreciate. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but the villain in this Zemo. Nemo. That's right.
Zemo,
I like his.
Nemo.
What did I say?
It sounded like you said Nemo, like the fish.
I did say Nemo. Oh my gosh. Yes, my bad. Zemo. I'm fighting back a cold, and now I'm getting very delusional, apparently. Anyways, not Finding Nemo, but the other villain that was in this movie has pretty good motives. I can find that a little bit more relatable, and it's different. It's different for sure. A lot of the humor is pretty terrible. There's some shit in here that does not need to be in this movie. A lot of the Captain America stuff, even though this is pretty much should just have been another Avengers movie, not the third Captain America. But I do like the introduction of Black Panther, of Spider-Man. I remember Ant-Man's jokes, and Spider-Man's were kind of the better ones. The action was pretty decent, and as Matt said, I think you start to appreciate this more. Unfortunately, because a lot of the other MCU movies are so terrible, where you're like, man, I guess this one is pretty good. It tries to be different a little bit.
Yeah.
So that was my number 4.
My number 4 is Guardians of the Galaxy. solid. Just a great movie. The soundtrack is phenomenal. The jokes, for the most part, land on every aspect for me. Drax is fucking hilarious, man. Rocket Raccoon is great. Chris Pratt's Star-Lord, great. I just thought it introduced real well. Ronan was a pretty awesome villain until, of course, yes, the end, when he lost to pelvic thrusting. Other than that, I thought it was pretty solid. It introduced Thanos to us, other than an extra credit scene, but we got Thanos introduced to us and introduced the cosmos a little bit in the MCU, so it's definitely appreciated. That's why it's my number 4.
All right. My number 3 is Spider-Man Homecoming.
Jesus Christ.
Right. That's why I was like, holy shit. Spider-Man Homecoming for me, there is a lot in this that I do not like, but I think I can forgive for 2 reasons.
Sounds like a solid number 3.
I don't like any of the supporting cast, as we've talked about. I think the main things that hold so much weight for me and I can watch it over and over again is obviously Vulture, top notch, best villain in the MCU by far.
Interrogation mode.
There's definitely some humor in this that works. But I actually really liked Holland as Spider-Man. I think when I watch this more and more, I'm like, you know what? He puts more emotion into this, and it's too bad that with some of the supporting cast and some of the bullshit that goes on around him, it tries to take away from Holland's performance, in my opinion. I think he's miles ahead of the rest of them in his acting ability and what he tries to do, what he tries to bring to this character. And when you look at the movie from those 2 aspects alone, and then kind of the plot, what brings them together, I think it works. And it just not even for the humor, for just solid action, but just for some emotion that you can kind of get behind. You get behind Holland, you can obviously get behind Vulture, and I find myself rooting for him several times. It is a fantastic movie, and for whatever reason, those 2 can pull it together so well that I can forget about all the other nonsense that I completely agree with. I completely agree with a lot of the shit that Matt was saying, the supporting cast, and it just doesn't work, but they work so well in the movie that it works. It works for me.
Working. All right, my number 3 is Working America, Working Soldier.
Work.
Oh, God damn it. So Captain America, Winter Soldier is my number 3. Very solid addition to the MCU. I think it's one that a lot of people hang their hat on as one of being one of the better comic book movies of all time. And I think it's pretty solid. I just never can really get behind the Bucky thing. That's always been my issue with Winter Soldier. I just don't like Bucky at all. So in theory, I don't like the Winter Soldier. So that takes half the movie away because that's half the title. But the concept of it is really sweet. I love that whole Minority Report type situation where it's not what you're doing now, it's what you could do. And so we have to stop you. I love that. I wish they would have dwelled on it a little bit more. I wish it wouldn't have been a background plot. But again, pretty solid movie.
All right. So drum roll, I guess, somewhat for my number 2 is The Winter Soldier. I just cut off the drum roll. I said fuck it. I agree with what Matt said. I do not like the Bucky character. He annoys the shit out of me. However, this movie works so well, and it's funny because it was a forgotten film in the MCU for me. I don't know if all of these movies were being pumped out so quickly that even in my mind I was like, all right, give me the next one. I forgot a lot about it, and as I've spoke about several times, it was our friend Tommy and his jokes and kind of making fun of the movie in the theater is what stood out, is what I remembered about it. So kind of not a very good introduction and first viewing for me. But that being said, I watched it in preparation for our retro review, kind of like, okay, yeah, almost going into it prepared to take it down, to knock it down a couple pegs, because so many people are like, no, that's one of the best MCU movies. I left the next viewing, my second showing of it, going, okay, no, actually that's pretty good. And then I've actually watched it another time since then, and I enjoy The Winter Soldier. I think it's definitely one of the, obviously, my number 2. It's one of the better MCU movies. And I wish the MCU would take more risks like this, that they should learn from the Winter Soldier and take more risks and try to make movies not like the Ant-Man that tries to be a heist movie, that tries to be Ocean 11, but like the Winter Soldier where it just tries to be different. It tries to stand on its own and, in my opinion, succeeds.
My number 2 is The Avengers, the first one. Shane had it pretty far back there. I don't know. When we first saw it in theaters, I liked it. I liked it a lot. And, I mean, people held their hat on it. It made a lot of money. Until we watched it again, I used to think The Avengers was just a movie. It was funny. I was really surprised how well it worked to have everybody there when I first saw it. But when we rewatched it, I was just really surprised on how much of the humor landed for me. And I don't know if that was just because it's just that point for me. It just was so well done for me, because there's a lot of people out there that may not think it's funny at all, but I caught so much more humor in it, and I caught the flow of the movie and how the interaction between the characters. I don't know why, but the joke that stands out to me that I just recently discovered rewatching again is when Tony walks up to Thor and says, "You got a mean swing, Point Break." And it's just fucking hilarious that he's calling him Point Break. And then the fact that Thor Ragnarok kind of went back to it, and that was Thor's secret code name to get into the ship there was Point Break. I just thought that was kind of funny. I don't know why, but I thought that was really, really well done. Yeah, the third act is a little choppy. It's a big fuck fest of shit going on. Disposable aliens. Not much of a story. But this is like a popcorn flick that I can truly shut my brain off and just flat out enjoy for some reason. And the humor just lands on almost every aspect possible. And I just thought they made the characters work really, really well.
All right, perfect. So I guess process of elimination, we can do a drum roll for our unanimous number 1 is Doctor Strange. Now,
Kiss me. Oh.
Wait, what did you say?
Oh, you said kiss me.
Kiss. All right.
All right. It's Iron Man.
Man.
Yes. That's, if you've listened to our retro reviews this whole time, if you've listened to us talk about half these MCU movies, I think Iron Man is just numero uno. This is what I was talking about. This is the only movie that would be on my best comic book movies of all time, is Iron Man. It's so well done, and I think it's really underappreciated. Like, it's got a high score on the stupid Rotten Tomatoes and all that, and there does seem to be a good audience out there of appreciation for it. But I think there needs to be more recognition for this movie of how obscure one Iron Man is. I think we read that one article where he was saying Thor was the first obscure character that Marvel tried to use. No. Any Marvel character is obscure at this point, because other than Spider-Man and the X-Men, no one really gave a shit about Iron Man, Captain America, or Thor.
Yeah. And
the fact that Iron Man came in with such a thunder, Robert Downey Jr., of course, as many people say, he falls in line with like Hugh Jackman as Logan, and others that are just meant to play certain fucking roles. And they're meant to be these characters. And he just plays a perfect Tony Stark. I can't picture a different version or a different person as Tony Stark. I don't really like him now, but when I watched this first one, I can't imagine anybody else in the fucking role when you watch the first one. It's just a very flawless movie. There's no plot holes, really. There's no real, well, that's just stupid. It's simplistic in some nature, but it has some really good real-world aspects to it as well. And I fucking adore it. The comedy is 10 out of 10 on the comedy. Fucking hilarious movie.
Yep, completely agree. As Matt said, very simplistic movie, but it works, and it works so well, and really kicks off the MCU and sets the bar incredibly high that all the other movies, no matter, trying different things, they try to come close to this, and having a character or an actor that fits a character so well, as Matt said. And it's so enjoyable. And the theme, it's kind of funny that as we're going through rattling off all of our rankings of the MCU, and we were talking about like the humor and where the humor's at, and it's honestly kind of funny that's what we're putting into each of these movies of like, oh yeah, how did the humor do? How did it land? But this one it stands on its own. And humor, and action, and real-world problems, in just so many different aspects, and it really starts to build the ultimate letdown that is Iron Man 3, And, you know, we both bookended this whole list with Iron Man 1 as the top, Iron Man 3 as the dead bottom, and the villain that it's starting to set up for, and just everything. So many different aspects in Iron Man 1 work so well, and it's crazy to think that it was the first movie to start this whole thing off and nothing else. When you're watching all these in hindsight, leaving the theater for the first time, nothing can compare.
Exactly. The CGI, the action to this day is still better than 90% of the fucking comic book movies we get now. And it was 2008. Him flying is just so well done. And the fact that he was in a somewhat actual suit also makes it easier to watch. His head doesn't look like it's floating.
Yep.
It's just so much better than what we get now. It's amazing. The movie is absolutely phenomenal.
Yep, I agree.
All right, so that concludes our ranking of all 18 current MCU movies that are released. Our list is probably much different than a lot of other people. I've checked out a couple other lists on YouTube of just rando people and stuff like that. Everybody, I'm not kidding, everybody follows the line of Rotten Tomatoes. It kind of makes you wonder of the groupthink aspect of everything, and how well, or how so many people just like, oh yeah, well of course this is it's always Thor: The Dark World, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2. It's always those movies that are on the bottom of the MCU list in the lowest rankings of Rotten Tomatoes. Always seems to be people's back 18. Ours though is different, and much different. And so hopefully it's interesting in some aspects, and hopefully we gave a little bit of points. If you want to check out any of our reviews on these movies, they are on our channel here on Comic Movie Marks, so check them out.
Yes, absolutely. And be sure to comment. Give us your list, your 18, how you would rank these things. What do you think about our list? But the other thing, just real quick, that I noticed along the same lines is whatever the most recent movie that came out was, seems to be like the best. Like, Black Panther, it's so amazing. And then before that, Thor Ragnarok, it's so amazing. You know, and it just like goes down the line of which ones are like the top. So I can almost name how a lot of people on social media are like, oh yeah, if it's Civil War, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Thor Ragnarok, those are like the best movies in the MCU, and it cracks me up. I'm like, okay, so if it came out within the last 2 years, then it's the best.
Exactly. It just seems to be the same aspect, and you're kind of seeing some of that with Infinity War already. So we'll see how that goes. Our Infinity War review is going to come a little bit later than most, because we don't give a shit.
or scheduling. But yeah, let's go with we don't give a shit.
We could go watch it. Anyway, in case I don't see you,
good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. You're one of very few to make it to the end.
Yes, thank you very much.
Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Comic Movie Marks Podcast and hit the notification bell. You know, all these fucking YouTube channels say this shit, so I'm going to say it now.
Yes, it's perfect. And if you want to hear our full podcast, you can check out our podcast on iTunes or any other podcast subscription service.
Make sure you subscribe. Thanks again.